Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad everybody's here to be part of this today. We've got kind of a real special treat for you. We've got some living history here with us, 4 gentlemen who served in World War II. And how many of you kids know a little bit about World War II? About everybody. Well, yeah, I hope you'll learn a little bit more today. World War II was the most significant conflict in our world's history. You know, there were 16 million Americans that went off and fought in World War II. So it was by far, a world war. We were in almost every country, and these brave men and women went off and fought wars all around the globe, and they saved the world. They did something incredible. They actually saved the world, and we're still free today. Most of the world is still free today because of what these men and women did 70 years ago. It took about 60 years to build the memorial in Washington, D.C., and a memorial is our nation's way of saying thank you. It's a big structure out in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and it says thank you to that whole generation for their service and sacrifice. And I want to start the day off by showing you a little video. It was a tribute when they first opened that memorial, that dedication ceremony, about 11 years ago. So let me play this here.
I'm glad to see that they're finally recognizing the massive effort that this country did in World War II. I feel like it's my last hurrah. I'm glad I came.
I wouldn't miss this for anything. This is awesome. It's all about us from World War II, and everyone was involved. This is a great thing that they've done. It's a beautiful place. I get chills. It's just so beautiful.
I think it's wonderful. It's just something.
Looking at it in person is more than the pictures portray. And it's wonderful to see people thanking him for what he did, because they did a lot. It really is incredible, and this is a long time coming.
If you could stand here and see this site, it's one of the most amazing sights that I have ever seen in our nation's capital, and all I can think of is, God bless America. On behalf of the American Battle Monuments Commission, the executive agency authorized by the Congress to establish a national World War II memorial here in the nation's capital, it's my honor, my deepest honor, to welcome you all here for today's dedication.
We gather to pay tribute to sacrifice and valor, to common cause and compassion, to triumph and determination. Your lives have led the way in war and peace. We are honored and obligated to honor you with our lives by fulfilling our duty, the duty to carry on your noble mission. I salute each and every one of you.
Had this memorial been erected at war's end, the surviving participants of the Second World War would have long ago gathered here to remember those lost in the conflagration. But as we now live in the third millennium, time demands that more than the fallen be remembered in this place of national honor. The first stanza of the Star-Spangled Banner asks not merely about our flag, but about ourselves, as demonstrated by the sacrifices made by those alive in 1941 and by those who never saw 1946. You, our extended national family, declared by your actions that yes, our flag still flies. We do come from a land of the free, and America is a home of the brave. Thank you.
So you can tell by the crowd that was there on that day that it was a pretty special opportunity to be there and dedicate that memorial. 16 million men and women served in it. It's really a beautiful sight. Part of the Honor Flight program, we bring these men and women out there to see that memorial so that they know what they did mattered and that they'll never be forgotten. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guest here. If Mr. Bill Hill will come on out. Bill was in the 96th Infantry Division. Mr. Dick Robinson. Dick was a MP in the Army, United States Army. And Mr. Harrington. Come on up. Mr. Harrington was 1st Infantry. So we have men here from both sides, the Pacific and the Atlantic. And my friend Jim Crabb, who's the United States Navy representative here today, fought in the Pacific. So the plan is to have kind of just a little informal question and answer session too, but we want to learn a little bit about what it was like all those years ago. 1941, that seems like a long time ago. I wasn't here. I know that. I know most of you weren't here either. But, to find out a little bit about what that was like. And, I think I'll start off by asking you what it was like, during December 7th, 1941, when we found out that the Japanese had attacked and the United States of America was thrust into World War II. Where were you? What was it like? Where did you go to school? And what was it like on that day you heard the news that we were going to war?
I was living in Edgewood, Edgewood just south of town, and we heard of the Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And so everything changed. We had the food rationing, tires were rationed, gasoline were rationed, sugar was rationed. We had scrap drives where we brought metal. We brought metal to schools, and everybody were enlisting, and you could see people in all different kinds of uniforms. And it seems as though that as the war progressed, then many people were drafted, and eventually there were 16 million. 12 or 16 million people in the United States were in the service. I was a young man, 14 or 15, I forget, and so I knew I was going to be going to war. And so I took classes at Tech High School, make sure that I could knew Morse code and do other items like that. And so when the time came for me to go, I was 18 years old, and that happened in 1944. And down here on Pennsylvania Avenue is the Armory, and that's where I was enlisted. Then I went to Camp Atterbury. From there, and Fort Blanding, Florida, Camp Blanding, Florida, and overseas in 45. And from there, I went on to Okinawa.
Thank you, Bill. And Mr. Robinson,
Yeah.
what was it like, the scrap drives, and Bill here just said that people were bringing in metal and tires, and it was an entire country. Everyone was involved, not just the veterans. Everybody at home. It affected every single person in the country, in the world. What was that like?
I want to say amen to that. We had scrap drives. December 7th, 41. My brother and I and a couple of kids were trying to learn how to play chess, and it was announced that the Japanese had attacked us. We thought we were a big country and we would knock them out in 2 or 3 months, but it took 4 years of hell to get it done. We had scrap drives. We had air raid sirens. We were afraid of being bombed because all Europe was bombed out. We were towards the end of a Great Depression where there was many people that weren't invited. But what I want to emphasize, World War II, yeah, we sent 16 million soldiers over, but there were 150 million Americans that helped win that war. The mothers went into the factories and into the fields to replace the men that had left. The kids took every kind of job they could. At 16, I was working in an army depot loading bombs all day. We were so short of people that we had Italian POWs working beside us. Everybody had something to do with the war. It was something you kids might know that wasn't all bad. Ice cream cones were 5 cents a piece. All the candy bars were only a nickel. We couldn't smoke cigarettes, but they were only 15 cents a pack. We had some things we didn't have that we didn't have drugs and all those problems. We didn't have any cell phones. We didn't have any computers. We didn't have any television sets. We didn't have any air conditionings. We didn't have any malls, shopping malls. We didn't have any big airports. We didn't have any superhighways. But it didn't bother us because we didn't even know that such a thing existed. We were just kids. We loved to play and run and so forth. But all of a sudden we had some responsibility. And everybody worked. Like he said, collecting kids. The whole country went to war. The soldiers, a lot of them gave their lives. But I want you to know that everybody was involved. People went through great difficulties. But fortunately, with the help of God, we got it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Let me skip over to Mr. Crabb real quick. Jim, Mr. Robinson just explained that we were able to win a worldwide war without the World Wide Web, right? Imagine that, communicating all the way across the globe. Morse code and radios, it seems pretty challenging, but we did it. And I know that you kind of came in towards the tail end of the war there, so you had plenty of time to watch what was happening, this buildup, and you knew the price that was being paid. And as you were waiting to join the Navy, and you were watching on television and hearing on the radio, going to the movie theaters, seeing the clips about the progress being made, that must have been a scary time. It must have been a proud time to go off and serve your country, but in reality, it must have been pretty tough. Was it hard to watch that, knowing that was coming and what was waiting for you as you joined the war? And what was it like, getting on that ship and heading off?
Well, can you hear me okay? Number one, there wasn't any television. But I think I was, when Pearl Harbor hit, I was a freshman in Tech High School and very active in ROTC, so I kind of had that military flavor, and I really wanted to join the next day, but I was only 13 or so. But it was a different time because we were obviously going to school and learning things, but we got all these newspaper events and radio talk about what was going on, and it seemed like the closer we got, that we could hardly wait to finish high school. So I graduated from high school in January of 45, and joined the Navy the next day. And I was 17, and my dad had a sign for me. But I went to boot camp up in Great Lakes and got involved in a lot of things and could hardly wait to go to sea, which we did shortly before the war ended. I was on a troop ship, and we were taking troops to Okinawa to stage for the invasion of Japan. And luckily, the war ended just about the time we got there. So I can't even imagine how many lives that thing saved. But the day's up to, we just sort of live day by day. We help gather pots and pans and coat hangers to help the war effort. So we were involved in it probably, well, quite a bit, as a matter of fact, because that was just sort of the topic of conversation at that time. But I was glad to have served. I wasn't in a long time because after the war ended, we were mustered out and to get on with our lives. And the GI Bill, I think, was the biggest thing that happened during our era, because we came up through the Depression and we didn't have any money, and the college was the farthest thing from our minds. But the GI Bill probably made us what we are today. And having served, why, that was special too.
And we just learned a little bit about the end of the war in Japan. You know, it's important to know World War II, there was a lot of different players, a lot of different countries involved in it. It was truly a world war. So we had Japan on one side there on the Pacific, but on the other side of the world, the Atlantic, we were fighting against the German army. And it all really started off, not with just Pearl Harbor, but our involvement in one of the biggest amphibious. Do you guys know what amphibious is? Amphibious is kind of involving water, people on the water coming onto land, and the largest amphibious invasion in history was the D-Day landings. Have you heard of D-Day before, kids? D-Day, that was an incredible feat that we accomplished, and that's where we first landed on the shores of Normandy, France, that was occupied by Germans. The German army was taking over Europe one country at a time, and they'd built this Atlantic seawall that they said was impenetrable, that nobody could get through. And here come the Americans, thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans. And there was a little beach called Omaha out there, and our friend Mr. Harrington, I understand you were involved in the D-Day landings. What do you remember about your time there? And I know you trained over in England too, building up to that. What was it like being on that island over in England, getting ready to cross the channel and start that adventure?
When I got to England, there was nothing. I mean, England was bombed by little buzz bombs that the Germans sent over. And we had the ACAC. The girls in England ran the ACAC guns to shoot the things down. And then we got word that we're going to go on the beach. So we loaded on a ship, set on the English Channel for 2 days. The tide was so high. So like said, Mr. Eisenhower, my chief and commander, says, we got to go. So we got on our ship, went down on a lope ladder, all the way down to our little ships that took us into the shore. The tide was so high that it was about 6 foot. Just as soon as you stepped off of the boat, you sunk in water. We were 6 feet. The water was so deep that you bobbed up and down to get to shore. Well, on the right-hand side, about 50 yards off the shore, the Germans had guns, machine guns. They had a pillbox there, all concrete. Well, we lost so many guys. Eisenhower wouldn't let them bomb Pearl Harbor or Omaha Beach because that's the only place they could be landing, and there was nothing to lay behind, only a little teeny rock or sand. It was about three football fields to a hill to get out of off Omaha Beach. I had a lot of buddies got killed. I had a brother that I'm going to go a little further. And then it took me probably about 17 hours to get off of the beach. And then we all got together. We stayed up there on top. The English was on our right. We had the 9th Division on our left. And then we got all assembled up on top of off of the beach. We stayed there for 1 day. Then we had word that we're going to go through. We were supposed to go up through the Battle of the Bulge, but they said, well, we're going to go the other way. So we went to the left, went through a little break through a St. Lo. Probably, I don't know if people ever heard of it. That was our big break through a St. Lo. Went up through Belgium, Germany, up to Belgium and Germany. Got up to Germany, the Ziegfeld line. And the Germans had trenches, miles and miles and miles. And behind the trenches, there was he had concrete, it looked like a pillar. And he had them so close that you couldn't even drive a vehicle through. We couldn't hardly walk through there. And then up in Aachen Forest, up in Germany, it was all, I mean, they had trees 40 and 50 feet high. And we were in there. We'd go on maneuvers every night, go out about 10 to 15 miles, 4 of us, always come back, see if we could see any German. We came along with a lot of Germans, but we never tried to get in conflict with them. We just wanted to know how close they were. Where we were out on one night, walking along, my buddy hit a landmine. I was on the outside. My 2 buddies got killed. I ended up in 81st General Hospital in South Wales. I was there for 2 days in a coma. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know myself. Finally, I came to. I was in the hospital there for 1 month. They learned me how to walk, learned me how to talk. And then that was 1944. And then they wouldn't let me go back with my 16th Regiment. I was with the 1st Division, the 16th Regiment. And they wouldn't let me go back, so I went with a chemical company in England, and I was there till I got discharged, till I came home to Wagner, South Dakota. That's where I was born, in Wagner, South Dakota. I don't know if you ever heard of a little town of Wagner, but it's about 120 miles straight from Sioux City, Iowa. And I was in the 11th grade when the world broke out. I had a brother got killed in Okinawa. I had a brother in the Air Force. And thank the Lord I came home.
Mr. Harrington, we're very grateful that you did indeed come home, but it's obvious just listening to you share that it's not easy. You know, war, as we know, is difficult. It's not an easy thing to talk about, and thank you for sharing what you did with us there. Mr. Hill, do you have any funny, any interesting stories to share about your service time over there? I know a little of what you did. You did an awful lot, and we heard about the tough times during war, but what's something these kids can maybe relate to? Anything that was, what did you do when you got bored? Anything fun? You know, anything interesting to share about your time over there?
I had a very interesting time on the island of Saipan just before I went into Okinawa. We had about a month's training in Saipan. It's a tropical island. And so our next step was going into Okinawa. We were going into battle. And so on the last evening we were there, we had a little recreation time. We'd sing a few songs. And as a gentleman got up and he says, I just got a telegram that my brother was killed in Italy. Would you sing the song, My Buddy? And so we did. Nights are long since you went away. I think about you all through the day. My buddy, your buddy misses you. Well, we all felt sad. He had lost his brother. Well, he got up and he says, "Would you sing it again?" And so we did. And so now I'm going to ask you to sing with me that song to remember all those guys that never made it back. Can you begin with me now? Nights are long since you went away. I think about you all through the day. My buddy, your buddy misses you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. And I think it's safe to say that, we lost so many there that there wasn't a family who wasn't touched by that war. 16 million, that's a really big number, but there was about 400,000 that didn't come home. And I know that's one of the things, as part of the honor flight, when we're there at the World War II Memorial, there's a wall of honor that has these stars. Each one of these 4,000 stars represents 100 lives, 100 Americans who didn't come home. And that the closure that hopefully that brings to our veterans that we fly out there. And Mr. Robinson, what type of closure, what did it mean to you to go out and see that memorial? We just watched the dedication there before we started today. What was it like to go and see that memorial in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yes, I've talked to many of the people that went with me, and we've been so honored and so taken care of that I'm almost embarrassed. I was a PFC, went in to become a pilot in the Army Air Force. The Air Force was a separate organization at that time. And some of my friends from church talked me into going. My friend, Mr. Roger McCaffrey down here was my guardian. And like I say, I served most of my time. I went in to become a pilot, but ended up being a military police. We had it very difficult in our country because of the war. But the people in Europe really suffered. We went in and all the big buildings looked like these buildings you see on TV that are in Syria. Everything was bombed out. People were living in huts and so forth. It was terrible. But anyway, I never got shot at. I was never a hero. I was just another one of the guys that went and did this because everybody did it. Everybody. And I still think the home front that built the tanks and the guns and the bombs and so forth that made us win the war. It was the whole country. But our trip, back to our trip, I didn't want to go, and now I'm this biggest fan. I'm trying to talk all my friends that are World War II or Korean War what to go there. They make you feel so special. They did everything so well. We were greeted here. We were greeted in Washington. We went to see all the memorials. And while we had a great war, you'd go to the Arlington Cemetery and see the rows and rows and rows of crosses of people who died for this country. I came home feeling grateful that we have such a great country because so many people have given. And something I'd like to have all you young folks remember, if you remember nothing else from this, that nothing is free in this world. Nothing. Somebody gives you, say, buy this and I'll give you something free. It isn't free. You get a present at Christmas or it's your birthday. It's free to you, but it's somebody paid for it and so forth. And I want to tell you, you live in the greatest country in the world. We're free, but it wasn't free. 400,000 American families got a telegram saying that their father or their brother or their son was dead and would never be coming home. That's what it cost.
Thank you. We just heard a little bit about the price, those rows and rows at Arlington National Cemetery and cemeteries all across the country, and heard about the heroes that didn't come home and the heroes that did come home. And I know that it's difficult for you men to take that gratitude, to accept the praise and the gratitude, the thanks of a grateful country. And one of the things in the Honor Flight program, we insist, we tell these men and women, and I can relate myself. I've got 2 children, and I tell these guys, I say, my kids need a role model. They need to know what a hero is. Who's heard of Peyton Manning? Peyton Manning's a pretty good football player, isn't he? He's not a hero, though. There's a lot of guys that play basketball or sing music and drive race cars. Those are celebrities, they're athletes, but they're not heroes. And I tell these guys, I said, my children need to know what real heroes are. And they're always saying, oh, I'm not a hero. I'm not a hero. And I say, well, if we can't call you a hero, then who do my children call a hero? Who are they supposed to look up to if not you? I'm curious, Mr. Crabb, what was it like coming home, not only from the war, but coming home from the Honor Flight? And, what is that like for you? How does that make you feel when strangers will come up and say thank you?
Wonderful. I love it. The thing that gets me, I wear my hat, around when I go to the store and stuff. Excuse me. And people still come up and thank me for my service. So, I hope you guys out there never forget us. Unfortunately, I'm very emotional, and I wear everything right on my sleeve. So keep on thanking us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. I know it is an emotional trip and just an emotional journey and an emotional thing, just being here talking about that experience, because it changed not only your lives, but the world, of course. It was such an impact on you. Who here would like to talk about what it was like after the war, when we came back home? Maybe who got home first? Because with that many folks serving, that many Americans abroad, and the war was over, they didn't all just come home the next day. It took months and months for these guys to come back home. And there was quite a celebration at first, but then it kind of died down, and we still fought a lot of troubles. We were in a bit of a depression. The economy was tight. Money was tight. It was time to get back to work and kind of rebuild. But I'm curious, who wants to talk about what it was like when they came home after the war was over? Please, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to go back a little bit. And after the war in England, they made us, I should have came home. A lot of captains, lieutenants, I was with them in the camp. And the government, I should say the Army, kept us over there for about a year and a half after the war, just shipping us back and forth, and finally we came home. I came home on the USS Anderson, and we landed in New York. They give us steak dinner. After dinner, and the next day, they sent me to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, Chicago. I got discharged. I was there for 3 days, physical. They give me $300 at Westinghouse pay for 3 years of service. That was beautiful. A lot of money at that time. So from Chicago, we got on a train that took me up through North Dakota, all the way around to South Dakota. Finally, I got home after 2.5 days on a train. We had little pit stops. Finally got home to Wagner, South Dakota. And the Corps of Engineers came to my hometown. They built a dam down at Pickstown, South Dakota. I don't know if you ever heard of it or not. Well, that's down and I worked for the Corps of Engineers for 4 years. After that, my dad said, "Are you going to stay on the farm?" I said, "No, Dad, I'm going to get out of here." So I went to South Bend, Indiana. I was in South Bend, Indiana in 1955. I worked for Bennings Corporation for 38 years as a maintenance person. I retired. I met my beautiful wife, Louise Cheetah Harrington. I made her Harrington instead of Cheetah. And we had 2 girls. One went to Tri-State University, and the other one wanted to get married, so she got married. She had 4 children, beautiful children. My wife and I was married for 59 and a half beautiful years, and I just lost my wife in February of 1914. We were married for 59 and a half years, and that was it. So now I got the veterans to back me up, and it's so gorgeous. I mean, it's just fantastic. Just the honor to be on that honor flight. I hope you people, all of you, someday get to go to Washington just to see the monuments, because it'll make you cry. It's just out of this world to see that monument.
With the dedication of that memorial, there was quite a big push, and we saw, Tom Brokaw coined the very famous phrase, "the greatest generation." And what do you think about that? Your generation did so much for us, not just winning the war and saving the world, but rebuilding the country and most of the world, much of the world. We didn't just go and conquer Germany and conquer Japan. We stayed and we helped them rebuild. And today, what was once our enemies 70 years ago are today some of our best allies, some of our best friends. And it's amazing that example that your generation set. And what is it? Do you agree with that? What do you think about the greatest generation being called part of that?
Well, it's kind of humbling. We did what anybody else, what I hope that you folks would do if you got in the same situation, but everybody did it. We don't feel special. We just did it because it was our country. And our country's done more for us than we ever did for them. It's a free country. I got out of the service in late 46. I was able to come home. Things were considerably better than when I'd left. There were still a lot of jobs. I was 19 years old. I'd seen the world. I'd learned that I could go to college. We didn't have any money, but I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. Anyway, I got out. We took the GI Bill, and the colleges couldn't take care of all the GIs when they came back. So New York State created 3 special colleges. I went to one called Sampson, where there had been a naval base. I then transferred to Syracuse, and I hope some of you knew about Syracuse basketball. Anyway, I graduated as a mechanical engineer out of Syracuse in 1952, joined a company called the Alice Chalmers Company and took an engineering series of studies with them in Milwaukee and came to Indianapolis in 1954 as a sales engineer for them. And one of my best customers was Bendix. Anyway, I worked for them for 12 years, learned the business, learned how to run things, and started my own business. Had the business and actually owned 2 companies that were engineering sales companies. Most of the water you drink from in the city of Indianapolis, my company furnished pumps for them. The Eli Lilly and the Allison people have our electrical equipment. And I've had a great wife. But when we first came home, we were all so positive. We were all so young. We were all getting married, and we were all having families, and the war was over. There was a VJ Day that I understood was tremendous. I was in a troop train in Birmingham, Alabama. There was no air conditioning in those days. The temperature was 104, but they wouldn't let us off the train. We didn't get off the train until we didn't know where we were going. I ended up in Denver in the military police school. But the thing that hung over us in the world was over. We celebrated, and we went back to try to put our lives together again. And it was happy times. There was the disagreements with Russia and the atomic bombs and so forth to worry about. But we learned from winning that we should take care of our enemies. Jesus told us to love our enemies. It's hard to do. But when I worked beside those POWs, Italian POWs, and the Italians were against us in the war too. They were part of the war. And I thought they were helping me load bombs that might be used to kill some of their own people in Italy. War is bad. I'm afraid we'll always have it. We have a free country. And I hope that you guys, I hope that you're the greatest generation and you take care of this country. We did it. We're glad we did it. We're glad that you're here. We're glad we live in the United States. Thank you.
The thing that gets me talking and hearing these fellows talk is how fast the time has gone by since the days. I've been married 64 years. I just can hardly believe it, but it's been wonderful. And so we do have a lot of things that we're happy for. We got 5 children, all doing well. And so I have no regrets.
Good. 64 years. Congratulations. That means you found the right woman.
I did.
Mr. Hill, we've talked about, the children. He said he's got 5 children, and I know that you personally are very passionate about getting this message out to the youngsters. And one of the things we love to do is to bridge the gap between the greatest and the latest generation. And why do you think it's so important? Why are you so passionate about getting this message out? And I'll let you plug your website. He's got an incredible website with great resources you guys can go home and look into a little bit. But talk about why we can't forget the lessons of World War II and why you're so passionate about teaching the youngsters about that conflict and your involvement.
Well, the war affects everybody. And for every soldier that's killed, there's maybe 15 or 20 people and their families affected. And so that's the tragedy of war that you'll hear very little about. The suffering that mothers did, the wives did, and the children that didn't have a father anymore. So that's what gives you gives you the compassion for other people. And so, as I write my stories about my old buddies, I can see that in their lives. They'll say, well, you've written this story about my dad. This will be for generations later on. But it affects everybody. And as veterans, they see our people wearing these hats. They say, "Oh, my brother was over in Europe," or "My uncle was over there." Everybody's touched by war. Everybody's connected to each other. And one of the reasons I wear my hat is to connect with other guys, and which is good. And it also gives an opportunity for people like you to thank us, which is all right. But primarily, I meet other guys, and there's a real camaraderie. I can talk to him, and he can talk to me about things that you folks don't understand. We relate to each other. When I go down to the Veterans Hospital for treatment and so forth, all those friends, all those are my buddies. We're comrades. It's just there's just a bond there. And so to lose those people, it's just part of us. We're all part of this together. And naturally, I'm compassionate about it. And so, does that pretty well cover your subject?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I know you've got some information there before folks leave. If they're curious about the website, you've got some information to pass out to learn a little bit about it. So maybe when we're done and you come and meet these men, you can grab one of these and go home and read some of the stories that Bill has on this website, because they're very good, very, very informative.
Thank you. Thank you. I took the Honor Flight, and my story's on here too, my website. Now I've got several of these to pass out, and how do I pass them out? Right down?
We'll wait till we're done, and maybe they can come down and pick one up if they're interested.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I have this website is to remember my buddies, and the name of the website is Remember the Deadeyes. I'm the last man standing now of my unit, and I've collected their stories and their tributes, and so it's like I say, these are for those that go on. But we have a lot of connections here in Indiana with my division. There's Ernie Pyle, who was killed not too far from where we were. There, Vice Admiral Spruance, met his wife at Shortridge High School. Marjorie Main used to be a mall kettle. She is from Acton, Indiana, and all this is explained in here. Well, when I was in the Army, I gave my wife an engagement ring. Well, just a minute after I got back out of the war, we married. We had 4 children, and now we've been married 69 years. We have 19 great-grandkids, and we're all proud of it. There's not an ugly one in the bunch. And so my wife has Alzheimer's, and I just saw her yesterday. But life is precious. Life is a gift. Use it wisely, and hopefully we won't be getting into very many more wars. Now, I have a lot of these to pass out, and I got enough. I got 20 of them, 18 or 19 or 20 of them, so everybody can have a copy of it.
Perfect. Thank you, Bill. And I know that as much as we'd love to just keep talking, we are fairly limited on time, so I'd like to open it up to questions. And I asked a few of you if you had any questions. This is a great opportunity to learn a little bit from some living history, what it was like. And Carol, if you can grab one of the microphones here. And so I've been thinking about some questions to ask these men. Who has some questions? Let's get a couple questions for these guys.
Right here. What was the canteen like?
What was a canteen like?
When you talked about a canteen, I think you might be thinking about the USO, the type of entertainment that we had at those times. And everywhere you went, there was a USO that you could go to, and there was quite often some young ladies you could dance with and pretend that the war was over for a few minutes. The Red Cross would furnish coffee and donuts, and there were just people taking care of people. It was a great break. We also had entertainment with people like Bob Hope and a number of the people, actors and so forth, went all over the world and took a chance with their lives to go into bad places. But the canteen was the fun part of the war. It got us away from it.
There we go.
The canteen, after you get off of a 25-mile hike, it was always so nice to go down there. Could you get a beer for a nickel? Get all the pop you want free. We always had popcorn. And cigarettes was free, but I didn't smoke at that time. I smoked after I landed on Omaha Beach. But the canteen was beautiful.
It was fun.
Yeah, the canteen was kind of a home away from home with the entertainment and just a little break from the horrible thing that was war. Go ahead, young man.
What was boot camp like?
What was boot camp like? Oh, boy.
Oh.
My boot camp down in Camp Blanding, Florida, I got there, and boot camp was get up in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. You had reveille. You took exercises for a half hour. Then you went and had your breakfast. After breakfast, that sent you all home to brush your teeth. And an hour later, the captain, they'd blow the bugle. You'd meet outside, go on a hike, go out on a rifle range, and that was our boot camp. You didn't have no time to relax. You were so happy at night when you could lay down on that couch and go to sleep. Believe me, it was something.
I've got a little boot camp thing. I was at Great Lakes in the early spring of '45, and all the Major League Baseball players played baseball up there. So we Bob Feller, names that might not mean a lot to you, but at the time, this was our entertainment, and that was the one thing that made life. We were learning how to fight fires and shoot anti-aircraft guns, but the relaxation was on Saturday afternoon at the ballpark.
Who has another question? Young man, go ahead. What's your question there?
Why did you join the war?
Why did you join?
Well, I got a letter from the President of the United States. I got a president from Roosevelt. He said, "We want you. You're going to come to the service." And so that was my thing from President Roosevelt. I'm sorry I haven't got the letter anymore, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah. To answer your question a little bit, I joined the Navy because I didn't want to go into the Army.
Keep passing that down. That's a good question. Mr. Robinson, why did you join?
Well, I was 17 years old and just got out of high school. And I joined the Army Air Force because I didn't want to be in the Army. The Army Air Force, we were Army Air Force in those days. The Air Force, as you know it today, didn't exist. But all of us, you didn't have any choice, young man. And if you were 18 to 40-something years old, you either enlisted or you were drafted. It took that to get 16. No, there was no. You were going to go in the service anyway if you were healthy. And so we all of us kind of tried to pick our place. And I thought flying in an airplane was much more fun than marching as a soldier in the mud and dirt.
I was 18 years old, and I knew I was going to go, so I said, "Hey, take me." I didn't wait, and so I didn't regret it, but it almost cost me my life. If I had waited till they drafted me, I'd been about a month later and been a lot safer. But anyway, the strange thing about this was, I thought, well, I won't have to go in the infantry if I go join the Navy. So I couldn't get in the Air Force, so I tried to get in the Navy, and they wouldn't take me because I was colorblind. But you know what? On Okinawa, there are more guys lost their lives in the Navy than the Army. Those kamikaze planes came in and was sinking their ships, and those poor sailors, they couldn't even sleep. And so the Navy lost more than the Army on the Battle of Okinawa, and the Navy lost more than the Marines on Okinawa. So that's a surprise for you. But I was always proud to have been in the infantry, and I'm like him. I took my basic down in Camp Landing, and so is that covered it?
That does, thank you.
Yeah. Question?
Any? Yeah, who has some more questions?
Did you ever get packages in the mail?
I know you got some letters from home from time to time when you're there in the trenches and aboard these ships in the South Pacific and wherever you were. What was it like to get packages from home?
Oh, it was really nice to get a package from home, and also nice to get my letters home, letters from my girlfriend. She put perfume on them, and you could smell them. So first thing I do, I smell it first before I read it. But let's talk about letters from home on the Honor Flight. The Honor Flight in itself was a beautiful thing. It's obviously give us a dose of humility to think that so many people would take the time and the money to help us take a flight back. Well, the trip there, of course, we saw a lot of the memorials, which was extraordinary. And on the way back, we all got mail from home, just like in the service. And there's a lot of work done in the background to get all these letters for us, and that was fabulous. Those letters from home were very good, and I still carry them. I mean, I still have kept them. And one more thing about the Honor Flight. When I came home from the war, there was nothing. So I say, oh, you've been gone? And so to receive the accolades and the applause and the cheers when we came back on an Honor Flight was something that I never had before and never since. And to acknowledge me for what I did was memorable.
Young man, you've got a question.
Yes. When and what did you eat in the war?
Oh, good question. When and what did you eat? Anything, right? Ate whatever you had, right?
The only thing we had to eat is sea rations. You got a little chocolate bar, you got a little Spam, a can of Spam, and you had little crackers. That's all you got to eat up on the front line. And talking about mail, I didn't get mail sometimes for 6 months when I was up the front line. I didn't know if my folks were living or not. It was terrible then. But that's what we ate. I don't know, the Navy always ate better than we did. And so did the Air Force.
I was in the Air Force, and we ate pretty good. A little difficult overseas. All our eggs were dried eggs, and I learned to hate eggs, and it took me years to get back on them again. But we were generally, the worst thing about eating was you stood in line for an hour to get into the mess hall. Or if you got KP and had to furnish the food. On KP, you went to work at 4 o'clock in the morning and got through at 10 o'clock at night. And you had to be careful or you get put on pots and pans, which were very difficult to clean because the pots and pans, you had to stand on they were so big you had to stand on your head to get to the bottom of it. The best job was peeling potatoes. The potatoes were already peeled, but you had to, but you you had 3 or 4 guys to talk to while you worked on the potatoes, and you could sit down and you could goof off now and then too. Anyway, they fed us as good as they could. When we were moving up through Germany, it was at the end of the war, we had C rations and K rations in those days, which were better. Every day that we were moving, it took us about 2 weeks to get from Le Havre to Munich, Germany, where I was. But every 4th day they'd stop the train and give us a hot meal. In between, it was out of the can. But we ate good. Hooray for the U.S. Air Force.
Do the movies portray what it was really like very well, do you feel? Can you capture that in a 2-hour movie, do you think?
You see a lot of stuff on the History Channel, and they talk about the things that happen, and you see it as a movie, but you don't really experience it. And so there's a lot of things there that we're not even talking about today that I think ought to bring up. When I was going overseas, the B-29 bombers had been coming back from Japan, bombing Tokyo. A lot of those planes came back with holes in them. Engines were smoking. A lot of planes never made it back. I went to the island of Saipan, and you could still smell bodies that had been rotting. When I went to on Okinawa, then there was some things there. I helped carry some of the wounded men back, and the wounded men, of course, there's blood on their clothes, and so these flies are everywhere, and so you have to swat the flies off the guys when you bring them back.
Thank you for sharing that, Bill. Yes, are there any other questions?
Right here.
What type of airplane did you fly, if you did fly any?
Yeah, I joined in my high school, the people came through and said, men of 17, you can also wear silver wings. So I joined to become a pilot, but the war got over. If you're really interested, I'll talk with you after a while. I've got a calendar down here that shows all the different airplanes we had, the fighters and the bombers. The group I was with was attached to the 8th Air Force in Europe, and our major plane was the B-17. It was called the Flying Fortress. It had 2 waist gunners on it. It had a gunshot on the top and one down in the nose. We flew in. I didn't take any bombing raids, but they flew in tight formations, so that when the fighter planes of the Germans came through, we could put as many machine guns at them as we possibly could. It'd be 10, 12. Maybe you've seen geese fly in formations. That's the way we flew our planes at that time.
Did any of you guys want to stop fighting?
Well, I wasn't on the front lines, but I know that it was you either had to kill or be killed. That was a real inspiration. Nobody liked to kill anybody, but that was a killing time. And like they say, there were millions of people killed. We were lucky there was only 400,000 Americans. Russia alone lost 2 million people.
Well, I was the infantry, so you had to kill, and you kill somebody. Well, you have to say goodbye, because he was going to kill you, or you going to kill him. And talking about a concentration camp, I helped liberate one. And if you ever had the smell, it'll make you cry. Believe me, it's terrible. It's terrible what he did to the Jews.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that nobody wants to go to war, and you can tell by these men and you know, the emotions that come out just thinking about it. It was not an easy thing to do, and it's not easy to talk about even 70 years later. Gentlemen, I certainly thank you. Were there any last questions? I know we need to kind of wrap up here. Yes, sir.
Yes, well, first, thanks for your service. I'm a unabashed World War II fan, and so this has just been very meaningful. I'm just curious what your impressions were when the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Certainly, you had no idea that that kind of power existed in a single bomb. So besides the euphoria of it being over, what were your reactions to such just an incredible event like that, or events? There were two of them.
Well, I remember, of course, we were at sea heading in that direction when the bomb was dropped. But actually, we really didn't even understand what it was. You know, the thing was so secret, it wasn't like you see it on TV today. But, of course, the effect, having troops going over to invade Japan, as we had, the thought of the war not being far from being over, these guys were just elated. A lot of the fellows I met who were going over had been through Africa, Europe, and they were going to be the lead troops into Japan, and some of them had been home for 3 years. So I can't even imagine what it was like for them. But as far as the technical part of it, we just didn't know what had happened really.
I had a friend of mine in Widener, South Dakota, was on one of those ships that guided a missile over to Germany, or to Japan, Wayne Bridge, and he got killed over there in the Navy on that.
Incidentally, to answer one more thing about your question, you know the story of the Enola Gay. Well, the pilot of that became a friend of mine, and he spoke. I had him as a speaker of an organization, a military organization I belonged to, and he was the neatest guy in the world, and he told us that a lot of people still came up to him after all those years and asked him why we had to drop that bomb. And he told them plenty, believe me.
Well, really, they dropped 2 bombs.
Yep. Any closing remarks, gentlemen, that you'd like to share before we wrap up today? Anything you'd like to, that one message you'd like to get out to the youngsters that are here with us today?
Yes, thank you for coming. I hope you don't have the same problems in this world, but this world seems to be, there's still evil, greedy people with seeking power. I hope you don't have to have another world war, but whatever happens to this country, remember, it's your country. You couldn't be in a better place. You could be the child of somebody in Syria or some of the refugees. Take care of this country. We tried to. We hope you can.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
I was on board ship headed towards Mindoro from Okinawa, and there was a bulletin posted on the bulletin board, a note that we had dropped the bomb. Dropped the bomb? What kind of a bomb? You mean the war might be over? We won't have to go get killed? And then when the second one dropped, the second notice, we were elated because we knew that obviously that the war was probably going to come to an end. And you think about that war coming to the end by the effect of an atomic bomb, it saved thousands and thousands of lives. The Japanese would not listen to all that. We were already destroyed 4 or 5 of their major their towns or cities, and this was going to end the war. And so, obviously, killing people with an atomic bomb is bad. But war is bad. And like we said before, you either get killed or killed. And so it's unfortunate those people were fried. It is unfortunate. But it saved a lot of our lives and the Japanese lives and even some Russian lives too.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you so very much for your time and coming out to share this wonderful information and just to pass these lessons down. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I give you Mr. Hill, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Harrington, and Mr. Crabb. Thank you very much.